And welcome back, footy fans, to another episode of Donnie's Disposals. I'm your host, Coach Donnie Hess here, back with another off-season supporter series. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end, my last and final chat of this particular supporter series. Just a quick note before we get into the chat. Unfortunately, North Melbourne and the Western Bulldogs, I was unable to find anybody. I wish I could. I really, really wish I could, but unfortunately, when you don't get responses, it doesn't happen. So I do want to apologize for those North and Western Bulldog supporters. I did not get a supporter on that. Trust me, I still love keeping track of your club. Unfortunately, it just didn't happen. Now, another point to this is that today's episode, we're going to have a second for a particular club that has already been talked to, only because I had to talk to this young lady because I've went back and forth with her for a lot. This is going to be a lot of fun. Joining me from Kansas and Kansas City, Missouri part or Kansas City, Kansas part?
The Kansas side,
The
yes.
Kansas side of it.
Uh-huh.
We have Leann. Leann, thank you for hopping on the podcast today.
Thanks, Coach. Very happy to be here.
I just didn't want to assume the Kansas City, Missouri part, so just
It's actually
wanted
a
to.
point of contention for a lot of people here, so it's probably best that you ask.
I was like, Kansas City, stop, wait, because there's both sides of the state, both sides, both states have part of Kansas City, so
Yes,
always
they
gotta
do.
ask to be sure. So, all right, so this I'm gonna have a lot of fun with this. Before we get into the footy part of it, let's find out just the littlest bit about you on a personal level, not about footy. So just a little bit about you outside of the game of football.
Okay. I grew up in Kansas. I grew up out on the farm, kind of in the middle of nowhere. Like if you find Kansas, it's in the middle of the United States, and if you find the middle of that, that's where I grew up. My I lived on the farm all the whole time I was growing up. I went to a little college in East Central Kansas called Emporia State University. Stingers up. And then that's where I met my husband, and we lived there for 15 years. And now we live in Kansas City, Kansas, which most people will know that here in the States that there is Kansas City, Kansas, and Kansas City, Missouri. It's basically all one big metro area, but we do live on the Kansas side, which is the better side. And we have three teenage sons. Actually, my oldest just turned 20, um, and we are just living the dream, trying to put some kids through school.
Yeah, I can understand that, especially with nowadays times here in the US. So we won't go political. We'll stay away from that. Reel it in, coach. So let's hop into it. As a woman living in Kansas, I gotta ask this. What is your finding footy story?
It was a little bit of a bombshell in my life, actually. Finding footy and finding the AFL were pretty much simultaneous for me. They're not the same thing, but I found footy by finding the AFL. Um, I um, Growing up out on the farm, 30 years ago, I did not have access to a lot of sport viewing or playing, honestly. But just we didn't even have a television in our home for part of the time that I was growing up. And if we had, we would have had access to about one or two channels.
Hmm.
And so once I was older and lived in a larger town, cable TV came around, and my husband grew up as a soccer fan. And so I started watching soccer kind of early in our marriage. And I was always a baseball fan because you could listen to that on the radio.
Hmm.
So I listened to baseball games on the radio from the time I was 4 or 5 all the way up until I was an adult. And then I could watch that on television. I kind of always had a little bit of a penchant for niche sports. Soccer kind of is a niche sport in the United States. And so that was kind of my gateway to finding other things on late night TV that were, different than baseball, football, basketball. And
Hmm.
so, we were that family that when the Olympics were on, we were watching handball and water polo and curling and things that are very popular in some countries, but not necessarily here in America.
Hmm.
So the AFL had some televised games even back in the 90s and early 2000s. I think you could watch a game on late Friday nights on some obscure channel. And so we would stumble across it sometimes and we would watch. And that was as far as it went. Um, I remember not really registering any of the team names or the places where the teams were playing. But then May 12th, 2018 rolled around. And so 7 years ago, and I woke up early on a Saturday morning. I flipped on the TV, and there's Aussie rules football being played. And it's the end of a game between the Fremantle Dockers and the St. Kilda Saints. So I'm flipping through, social media on my phone. I'm watching the end of this game. It was at Optus, and Frio won by about 30 points. And all of a sudden, I hear the club song start to play there in the
Mhm.
stadium. A much maligned song, by the way. If you are familiar with the club songs, the Fremantle Dockers song is not one that people would say, you know, is one of the best. But it was almost that grabbed my attention. It was kitschy, it
Mhm.
was quirky, and they're showing, the boys are walking around the ground, the crowd is cheering, people are singing the song, there's kids you know, waving their scarves. And it was not so much the song itself, but it just was, I was caught up by this very obvious culture that that has been built up around the sport and the clubs. And I just found it fascinating. So I start live tweeting it. I'm tweeting what's happening. Oh, they're playing the song again. I thought it was over. And look, there's people are singing it. What is this song? It's very odd. And just just a weird little Twitter thread that on a Saturday morning when you're not doing anything. And so a couple of hours later, I glance at my phone and I have over 100 notifications on Twitter.
Mhm.
And I'm like, what happened? And I found out that day that when you go online and you mention the Fremantle Dockers, it is like a dog whistle, but in a good way, right?
Mhm.
Like they come out of the woodwork. And so all of these messages were pouring in. Oh, you found our club. This is our, and people were sending me videos of Matthew Pavlich and Justin Longmuir after the siren and all of these, you know, here's the origin of our club song. And we're, just and so it took me almost days to go through all of it. And that was kind of that was the beginning of
Mhm.
the what we see today.
hmm Everybody's origin story is different. I absolutely love it that it took Twitter slash X, whatever you want to call it. I really don't care. It's a social media thing sometimes that like I still to this day say that one of the biggest things I tell of Americans when you get into the sport, I said one of the biggest things do not do is never go on to online and go, "Hey AFL fans, what club should I support?" I said,
Oh,
A,
yes.
you're gonna blow up your mentions for one. So you are going to get popular really quickly. But B,
Right.
you're going to almost start fights in your mentions because people are going to tell you what club they support and why they support it. So it's always this fun little thing. So I absolutely love that. That is absolutely fantastic. So we'll go to a little minutia, little things like what's your favorite part about this as you say this very unique niche sport that is Aussie rules football?
I will tell you, um, it is hard to start watching almost. I had all these messages from all these Fremantle supporters of
Mhm.
other clubs, and I had so the next week I had to watch another game, and
Mhm.
it's almost hard to start watching because there is no, um, it's so nonstop
Mhm.
that if you're coming from a background of watching a sport where there's a play and then there's a
Critter.
little bit of a pause and then there's
Mhm.
another play, it's very hard to get your head around it at first. But that turned out to be, um, I think, one of my favorite things about the sport. It's also this odd, I think, combination of very simple and extremely complex. Kick it through
Mhm.
the big sticks, right? That's all you really have to know. But
Mhm.
then when you start watching and you look at all of the moving parts that are involved, 36 people running around out there, it really, you can get as far into the weeds as you want. And so the simple and the complex together just make a very I it's just that I really like that about it. It's easy to watch and it's the most difficult thing to watch at the same time.
Yep. 100%, 100% agree. As much as it seems so simple, there's so much complexity to it. Like especially with me being a coach and working with people up here, it's like one of the first days, everybody's like, what do you need to do? And well, I said, how much do you want to know? Because I can absolutely roast your brain trying to tell you everything, or I can make it as simple as I possibly can. Because that really is about as much as you need to know. I said other stuff is going to come as you learn. So I'm 100% with you. There's a simplicity and a massive amount of complexity. I absolutely love it. So I'm gonna ask this. I'm pretty sure I know the answer. Have you ever had the pleasure of playing AFL? And if not, or Aussie Rules, not AFL. AFL is the league. Aussie Rules is the sport. I'm sorry, Aussie Rules is a sport Twitter account. If you see this, I apologize. Um,
He didn't mean
yeah, I know. I never do mean it, which I find it funny that they've got on me a couple of times, and I'm like, seriously, I'm an account that talks about your sport in the States, but whatever, reel it in, coach.
it.
But if you haven't, if you had the chance, would you play?
I have always been a rabid sports viewer and hardly ever been interested in playing anything. And now I'm over 40, right?
Mhm,
I, I like, I could do a knee just like getting in and out of my car. So
mhm.
we're at the point now where, if I was 20 years younger and like we have a footy team here, right? Because of
City
your
Power. Yep.
involvement with Des Moines, we have a team here called the KC Power. So if I was 20 years younger and I discovered footy, I don't know, maybe I would have been brave enough to go down there and check it out. But it is not something that has been, it wasn't a question by the time I
Mhm.
came around to it.
Nah, it's perfect. It's perfectly fine. So magically put yourself in the time machine. If you could have seen it when you were in your 20s, would you have?
Um, I don't know. Probably not.
I love the
Probably not.
honesty.
But
Love the honesty.
I would have spent years wishing that I had. Is That's kind of how I operate in life.
Nah, I completely get it. No, completely understand that. It's very much fun. I know that for a lot of us that have, it's you play it once and you either get addicted or it just doesn't appeal to you. It's usually one or the other. It's always so much fun. So, as we've kind of established through the conversation and those watching the YouTube video, very obvious, you are a massive Fremantle Docker supporter. So I'm going to jump to my next one. So as you got into the club via these messages, was it really all the messages from the Fremantle supporters that made you join in the Dockers bandwagon, or was it just because that was the first club that you got to hear their song? So what was it that made you a Dockers supporter?
I that's such a great question. So, um, I had a plethora of messages from Fremantle supporters. Hi guys, and really, they just gave off a very good vibe, of course. But that was because I was excited about their team, right?
Hmm.
There were also plenty of messages from supporters of other teams that rolled in on that same day, and I remember, um, I don't know if probably not all 18, but there were supporters of at least a dozen of the teams, like you said, jockeying for position and saying,
Hmm.
oh, this team is way better, or
Hmm.
you don't want to lasso, or you don't want to hitch yourself to
To the
to a
Dockers
second rate
bandwagon.
team. Like, yeah. So, but so I actually did kind of poke around online and message back and forth with a few people. And by the end of that Saturday, I had, mentally joined up with Frio. And it was there's a lot of things about the club, not only at first glance, but when you get into it a little deeper, that just really were a fit for me and they really
Hmm.
appealed. There's an immediate connection because you and I both live in a place that people like to call flyover country.
Hmm.
And so this was flyover country meets the most isolated city in the world, the forgotten city of Australia and the forgotten club in its own city to
Hmm.
some degree because the big bad boys of West Coast were
Hmm.
um, you know, they were flying high at the time, but also
Pardon
they
the
had
pun.
always, yeah, okay, no pun
Pardon the
intended.
song quote.
But
I'm
they
sorry, I
were
could not. I'm sorry.
that now that's a bad club song, right? Can we all just agree about that? But anyway, so the forgotten club in their own city, the forgotten city in their own country, and
Hmm.
I have never been one to hop on a bandwagon.
Hmm.
I when I started watching a lot of soccer, I refused to support a London team in the EPL. I mean, just kind of throughout my life, it's you don't want. I didn't want to just follow the crowd in my sports fandom, and
Hmm.
so um, Frio in some ways likes to brand themselves as that plucky upstart team, and one day we're going to do it and then it's going to be us on top, and that really appealed to me. I have this you wouldn't know it to look at me, but I have this slightly quirky like bohemian streak
Hmm.
deep down inside me, and the people um, of Fremantle just was a fit and it appealed to me. So it turns out that little bohemian streak in me is bright purple, I guess.
There's nothing wrong with that. I've stated it so many times. I said sometimes when you find that club that just clicks with you, everything just seems to work out perfectly. I know I've said it a few times on my podcast that the Swans clicked with me, and it wasn't just because of the fans. It was everything that I had seen, the history, the connection of two cities. So it's like I know exactly what it is. You find it, and you're like, oh my God, like I actually like picked a club and it fits me. And
I
I think
think your
that's
club picks you sometimes.
sometimes I do,
Mm-hmm.
I genuinely, with some of the people that I've talked with, I genuinely have really discovered that sometimes you don't even realize it, but the club kind of finds you and
Mm-hmm.
it matches you personally. It's absolutely fantastic. So I am 100% with you. So we'll jump to the next part. I'm very interested again, as Americans, it's not easy to get memorabilia. It's not easy to get Guernseys, sweaters, hats. So I got to ask, what was the first Dockers item that you were ever given or bought?
I think it that's a hard one. Um, right after the incident, I call it, um, somebody from the Dockers reached out and they hooked me up with a Watch AFL membership so that I could watch the rest of the games that year. So that was
Hmm.
actually the first purchase that was, or the first thing that was given to me was actually my membership. Um, and then a couple of months later, there were probably about 7 to 8 of the friends that I had met online through starting to watch the Dockers who got together and sent me almost like an Aussie sampler package.
Hmm.
Um, shapes, cheese twisties, chicken twisties.
Hmm.
There was a violet crumble in there, Tim Tams, some Vegemite, and there in that package were some. I think there may have been a scarf, or no, there was a beanie. It was a beanie.
Hmm.
It was a Frio beanie, and then there were some pins, with the players' faces on them. There were
Hmm.
a few of those in there.
The badges,
Um,
as they call them. Yeah.
yes. So that was the first Frio stuff that I ever got. And then that Christmas, I think my husband gave me like a women's Guernsey.
Hmm.
And then I have a couple T-shirts that I bought since then, but I am it. You're right. I don't have nearly as many items as I would if I could just throw money around for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I completely as I've went back and forth with a few Americans, and it's the one thing that I joke with is that it's kind of become my tradition a little bit as my birthday is when I kind of splurge and I buy stuff from the Swan shop or and
Mm-hmm.
I because it's like I let myself splurge one time because it's the shipping that gets you. Especially the shipping is the one thing that seems to get you. So I as somebody that, as you said, you like niche sports, you've been into it. So I'm very interested to hear you talk about this because I'm one of those. I'm a sports nut. I love sports throughout the country. Is like I said, I'm starting to get into cricket more down in Australia. I watch football, soccer, as you say. All the sports up here in the States. I watch Gaelic football. I watch hurling. I watch as much sport as I can. So fandom for me is something I've always been fascinated with because nobody in the world fans exactly the same as somebody else. So I love hearing this. Can you describe your fandom of the Fremantle Dockers for me? Because I know each American fan, it is a unique thing to be a supporter of a club that is hundreds of miles away.
It is. My my fandom, I guess, it's a very strange thing because there are some people in my life that um when you ask them to describe me, they'll being a Dockers fan is one of the things that will come up.
Hmm.
There are other people in my life who have no idea. And it's like this little secret, almost a secret side of me that some people know about and some people don't. And I never try to hide it.
Hmm.
Like at work, nobody at work knows that I support the Dockers. I have a little Dockers like koozie. What do they call koozies in Australia? Is it the same thing?
Stubby holders.
That's it. On my desk. And so if I have like a can of Coke Zero or something like that, that's what I put it in. I have a couple little, if I wear a shirt or if I, but none of those people have ever heard of the Fremantle Dockers. So I don't think anybody there has ever bothered to ask me, what is that? Someday
Mhm.
somebody will, right? But so some people in my life have no idea. And some people are like, my word, would you stop talking about this team? So for me, like on a weekly basis, though, my fandom is setting an alarm for the middle of the night,
Mhm.
creeping down the stairs with an iPad so that I won't disturb anybody. It's
Mhm.
pitch black. One of the cats comes and hangs out on the couch with me. I'm doing silent screaming on the couch in the dark. I'm live
Mhm.
tweeting the whole thing usually. And that's kind of week by week, that's what my fandom looks like is me in the dark trying not to wake up my family.
You and I are soul people because you and I are
Yes.
exactly you've seen mine. I can't tell you how I gotta ask this question without notice just because have you ever watched a Dockers game where they're not doing so well and had friends of yours that live in Australia tell you to go back to bed?
Multiple times. Yes. That
Okay,
is,
good.
yeah.
Okay, good.
Or
It
yes,
just
or I'll wake up and it's 5 minutes into the game already, and I'll have somebody that's already tweeted me and said, "You know what? Don't."
don't wake up.
Yep.
I I had that happen this last year at the Swans Port game. I had
Mm-hmm.
several of my Australian friends literally reach out to me, go, Donnie, go back to bed. Just
Yep.
don't waste your time anymore. Just go back to bed. And it was like 5:30 in the morning. So I was like, I
Right.
wasn't going to go back to bed. And I'm too much of a crazy nut. I'm going to watch it no matter how bad it gets. I will watch the end of it. But you and I are very much spirit animals when it comes to it. I'm the same way. I have iPad. I can't tell you how many times that something great has happened. And it takes every fiber of my being not to scream or just go nuts,
Yes.
and it's 3 o'clock in the morning. I can't, and I'm live in a condo complex, so I can't do any. It's even worse for me because I've got neighbors north, I've got neighbors east, and I've got neighbors northeast. So not always fun sometimes. So I know exactly the plight of that particular fan. So I like this because you as a mother, I'm even more interested on this because I think having a favorite player sometimes it's like choosing your favorite child because when you love your club, you love all of them equally. So I'm going to ask this of you. Do you have a favorite player of the past that used to wear the Dockers jumper? And do you have a favorite player currently on the Dockers list?
Favorite past player. I cannot I cannot answer this question without saying the phrase David Mundy.
Hmm.
Um, the Harry Potter books, he's called the boy who lived. I
Hmm.
call David Mundy the boy who stayed because he was a Vic boy who came over to WA, and people have remarked, by the way, that I say here when I say when I say Western Australia or when I say WA or he came here. I know I'm not there, but it comes out. But David Mundy was, I call him, bless you, I call him the boy who stayed. And he and his family have made their home in Western Australia. And he is every bit as much of a gem as as you think he is. He's a fantastic guy. Um, you know, coaches his kids' teams. Just great guy off the footy as well as on the footy. On the, I want to say on the pitch because I watch so much soccer, but on the park, he was always that player who looked like he just had more time to decide what to do with the ball than anybody else. The game just moved a little slower for David Mundy than it moves for other players. And he was just so smooth to watch. And he is probably my favorite past Docker for so many reasons.
Right.
So much wanted him to get to 400 games, and it just didn't happen.
And then favorite player currently on the Dockers list.
Um, so currently, like you, I find it really hard to choose because I just
Mhm.
want them all to. I just hope all the teams have fun. No, I really, really do. Um, Almost without exception, love all of our players. Um, Sonny, Michael Walters is a great guy, a great leader. Um, I am, I can't not mention him because he is, I think he just embodies what it is to be a Fremantle Dockers player. But we have a pretty young list still. So it is fun to see the guys kind of meshing together and growing up together out there on the field. Kind of.
Mhm.
I'm a big Hayden Young supporter. He's a great um,
Mhm.
young player and is probably going to be the face of the Dockers. Other besides Brayshaw and Sarong going forward. Um, I like Michael Frederick and Josh Tracy a lot up forward. Um, I think that one of my like niche favorites is Nathan O'Driscoll. He is a great young kid. His sister plays for our women's team, and Nathan has struggled so much the past couple of seasons with injury. I just really, really hope that he can kind of put that in the past, and have a great year this year. So he's a
Mhm.
favorite of mine as well.
Yeah, it's you start naming off ones and you're like, oh, I gotta say this one. Oh, I gotta say this one. So I
Yes,
I I
everyone.
know
They're all
I
my
know
favorites.
exactly. I know that pain. There are a few that tickle your fan. There's a few that you just absolutely adore. But it is like, as you said, as soon as you get started, it's hard to stop because you're like, oh, I like this one and I like this one and I like this one. So no, 100% understand it. So we'll get this out of the way really quickly because I know this isn't always easy. We go to last season. I know we are hop, skip, and a jump away from this next year, but we'll rewind back just a little bit. Unfortunately, Dockers look like almost certain finalists, and unfortunately, the last month kind of nipped them, unfortunately, losing four in a row and falling short of the finals. Your thoughts on last year's Docker season? Is it a disappointment that you looked so good for so long and fell short? Or was it another building year? Because again, Justin Longmuir is still kind of molding this group into what I think he wants it to be. Plus, you've had some new people as well.
Um, I, in some ways, it was bitterly disappointing because the year before it looked like 2024 was going to be the time when they could really step forward and assert themselves. And for a while, it looked like they would. Um, but also at the same time, they are still a young list. I really think that I'm really thankful that Justin Longmuir has been given some time to grow as a coach. I don't know if um, I don't, I don't know if he's the man who's going to take us to the promised land, but I really am glad that he's been given some time to um, grow, work out the kinks. I don't know that you make, I don't know that you make a legendary coach in 2 seasons or, a
Hmm.
short amount of time. And so I really feel like not only should the players take a big step forward this year, I think Longmuir might take a big step forward this year. And maybe last year they all just took a step back together. It was disappointing. And honestly, it watching finals was hard because that it really felt like a missed opportunity. Watching the grand final, Frio beat both of those teams last year.
Hmm.
And a lot of the other teams that looked great in finals, we had either beaten that year or looked good against. And so it did feel like a missed opportunity. Um,
Hmm.
so yes, it was disappointing. We were all pretty flat. I was flat, but at the same time, um, that doesn't mean that they're on the down now,
Hmm.
either.
No, totally get it. It's one of those that injuries caught you at the wrong time and just bad form hit you at the wrong time. But I'll say this, which is jump to my next one. This upcoming season that, like I said, we are less than 2 weeks away from. As a Docker supporter, there's got to be some confidence there because you bring in Shy Bolton, which I'm fascinated to see how he does in Fremantle. Is this the year Fremantle does some damage in the finals, or what are your thoughts going in for this particular season coming up?
We have at Frio what we call the triangle of disappointment, which is it goes up, that's you get your hopes up, and then something happens and they come crashing down, and then
Hmm.
so I I hope that we don't have to pull that out again this year. I really think um, there's a lot of question about this year. First, because it feels like I don't know why the preseason's so long. Everybody's already hurt. And I know a lot of teams are dealing with that. Certainly, we're not in as bad a shape as the Blues for injury, but we've got
We're
Hayden
the
Young
Saints or the
missing.
Western Bulldogs. Holy
Right.
crap.
It's a long preseason, and it takes a lot out of me to listen to those injury reports. But so we've
Hmm.
got Young and Darcy missing out at the beginning. I believe. Josh Draper is now dealing with a little bit of a hamstring. Um, and then Moose, Alex Pierce had a little bit of
Hmm.
an ankle that he couldn't even take part in the Indigenous All Stars match, which I think was really crushing for him because I know he wanted to be in that very badly.
Hmm.
So it kind of, I almost feel like it's hanging in the balance whether those injuries are going to turn into long-term problems or whether they can get past those in the first few weeks of the season and move on. um, I'm hoping to see. I think Draper is the real deal. I'm hoping to see a lot of him this season. I'm hoping Hayden Young gets through his injury and really starts to assert himself in the midfield. And I too am fascinated to see what Bolton can do. I don't know that he is. Um, I don't know that he's the player that's going to be the player on a team, but I feel like he's the type of player that might push you over the top if you're already close
Hmm.
to where you need to be. And I'm excited to see what they can do with him out there.
Yeah, the proverbial icing on the cake is what you,
Yes.
is what you hope is what you hope that he is. Yeah, the Dockers are one of those. They're like two or three teams this year that I look and I go, they're an enigma because I know they could be in the Premiership contention, or they could be another disappointing, miss the finals despite having a list that honestly has a lot of very strong members of it. So yeah, I'm kind of prepping my preseason stuff, and I'm going. There's 4 or 5 teams that I have what I call they sit in this enigma, and I'm fascinated to see because they can
Yes.
go either this way or they can go that way, and I don't
Yes.
know.
My preseason prediction for the Dockers that is that they will finish somewhere between third and 14th. So you
You're
can take
really throwing a lot of darts there.
yes, but it really feels like that.
It is.
I
It
don't
really
know
is.
what it is. We call it dockery.
Hmm.
It's Some people hate the term. I personally feel that it really says it all, so I use it.
Kind of a
So
fun, endearing term if you think about it. So,
it's
yeah.
it's dockery. Yep.
No, there's 14. I agree with you that there's 14 teams that honestly, if things go right, could all make finals. That's how solid this some of these teams are. But again, it's you just never know how injuries are going to go. Like I can sit here and make every prediction that I want and then be completely wrong because three things change over the season. So
Right.
it always makes the AFL like the AFL is so unpredictable sometimes that it's kind of fun sometimes just to sit there and watch it all play out. So as much as my tipping, I want to get my tipping right. Sometimes I find when I mess up my tipping, that it makes it even more entertaining because I
Right.
have no idea how the rest of the season's gonna go. So I want to have a little bit of fun because as a sports person, over here in the States, we call it the general manager position. And I find it fascinating how many fans think they can do the general manager's job better than the guy that's got it. And over in Australia, they call it the list manager. So I'm going to have a little bit of fun here. I'm going to install you as the Dockers list manager for one day. And I'm going to give you this fun task of all 17 teams have no way of stopping you. You can steal one player to join the Dockers to get them over that hump, to maybe make them a flag contender this year. Maybe end a little bit of that stinking dockery. Who's the one person you bring over to the West and why?
Okay. Full disclosure. You told me you might ask me something like this, and I sat there and thought about it. And I did not, I was, I was pretty baffled. I couldn't come up with a great answer, and here's why. It's the Herb Brooks principle, right?
Hmm.
Remember the
Yeah,
1980 U.S. men's hockey team, and I who knows if the movie Miracle is how true that is
it's
to
as accurate from what I've seen on it. It's as accurate as it possibly can. There's a few things that
right.
are fudged, but for the
Sure.
most part, most of it is factually accurate. Like I
Right.
know the skating scene that did happen.
Right.
I've
Right.
heard
So
things that did happen.
the Herb Brooks principle is what I call it, and that is I don't we don't need all the best players. We
Hmm.
need the right players.
Hmm.
And part of being the right players is getting a group together that gels, that has chemistry, that works together, that plays for each other, that
Hmm.
plays for their coach, and that trusts the process that he's taking them through. And I sat there and I thought, who would I bring in? And there's been talk about Kazi Pickett coming back to WA next year and all of that. I'd take him on my list in a second. And it's everybody wants a player who can do the things that he can do. I I don't know that I have a good answer for you. I will tell you that my favorite player to watch who is not a Docker is the Bont. We
Hmm.
don't need the Bont, so that's not the right answer. So that's
Hmm.
kind of where I'm at.
Well, can I? How about I throw it in? I've thought about this a little bit, and I was talking with Lee, and for me, the one thing everybody whines about when it comes to the Dockers is their forward line. I think you have elite level small forwards. You've got Shai Bolton, you've got Sonny Walters, you've got some elite levels. He threw up Schultz coming back from Collingwood. He wanted to get him back. That was one of his favorite players. But I honestly think that you've got bigs, but you don't have that dominant full forward. So for me, I think Charlie Curnow would be fantastic. Now, again, preface this if he can stay healthy, which I
Sure.
think is the biggest thing there. But imagine him being there with some of your with your forward line that you've got, because it would release a little bit of the tension of the Josh Tracy's, of the Jaya Miss, of the guys that they're supposed to be the full forward, but are they really molded for that full forward spot? So for me personally, I would be fascinated to see Charlie Curnow out west with you, or a Jesse Hogan back in actual GWS form instead of the form that he was when he did play with you. So, personal thought there. I went through it like there are very few deficits that you really have because I think you look at your back line, you've got Alex Pierce. I think Alex Pierce is one of the best fullbacks in the entire competition. If he could stay healthy, he would be in that same talk as the Wiederings, as the Sam Taylors. You've got Hayden Young, who kind of come off the halfback line. He can also go through the center. You've got Brayshaw, you've got Sarong, you've got Darcy, you've got Jackson, so you've got the Rucks. I think literally you have very few holes that I think you could go, well, it's obvious to put this person there. So I sat there for a little bit going, that really is the only one that I think most people is you have that full forward to go to. But again, it's just a guess for me. I don't know what your thoughts on that, but that was the first one that went through my mind. Harry Mackay's too inconsistent. That's why I wouldn't go with him. I
Mm-hmm.
like Hogan, but Hogan is a little bit, but if you get GWS Hogan from last year, absolutely dynamic. Hard to stop there, especially with the delivery you're going to get from that midfield. So
I am just sitting here thinking Josh Tracy and Jai Amos are going to be as good as Charlie Curnow.
I hope
So,
so. I really, dude,
right. That
I will touch wood that you were right. I really do. I'm just saying that would be the only one that I constantly hear all the time is that they don't have that full forward. So that's more of the
and that
reason that I
was
went
the
there.
issue for that
Yep.
was the issue for quite some time. And
Hmm.
now that they've, the emergence of Josh Tracy last year,
Yep.
I think was a little bit of a revelation. I really feel losing him right at the end of the season, it was
That
like
hurt. That
that
really did
I've
hurt.
never been so flat hearing an injury report as hearing that he was going to miss out on the rest of that was like
It's getting, yep.
it really really took the wind out of everybody's sails, but certainly mine. I mean,
Mhm.
it really, and then they went and lost four straight. I mean, it really, I don't know how, if that was obviously not the only factor, but
Mhm.
he came into his own last year in a way that
Mhm.
surprised even those of us who thought he was going to be a good key forward. So I
Yep.
really think he and Amos both. Amos maybe had a little bit of a down year from the year before when he had such a big
Mhm.
emergence, and I think if both of them now can, they've probably grown into their bodies a little more.
Mhm.
They may,
It could be a
they
scary
may,
duo.
yeah, they may be as good as Charlie Curnow, and we may be fine.
Yep.
So
Hey,
we'll
again,
just
to
we'll
each their
see.
own. It's always a fun one. I know I've actually had a
Mm-hmm.
few people actually love that question. In fact, I even have a Hawk supporter that stole it and asked a question of his Hawk supporters who would they take for AFLW, which I think is actually a great transition. Me bringing that up because, as everybody knows, I am a huge supporter of the women's game. I cover the women's game just as much as I do the men's because they deserve that coverage just a little bit. So I got to ask, are you an AFLW fan?
I am. Yes, I watch all of the Fremantle women's games every
All
year.
right. Thoughts on the Dockers season this last year? I will put my hand up. I thought when Anya Tighe went down, I honestly thought the Dockers season was done.
It felt like that, and that poor girl. I just I felt for her so much.
Hmm.
It is like watching your kids play. And so when that happened again to her, this is not the first time that she has had a season-ending injury.
Yep.
And with the seasons being so short, even if I believe this one was an ACL though, wasn't it? So she
Yep.
would have
It
been
was an
out
ACL.
regardless
Yep.
of the length of the season. But it was it was crushing to see her go down once again, almost more on a personal level for her than for the team. But yes, I
Exactly.
too thought, well, that's it. How are we going to score? And they really, really were able to pull things together and make it into an exciting season. I love Lisa Webb as a coach.
Hmm.
Um, I I just really, really enjoy um, watching that team. And I think it's so important that the AFL has um, taken a little bit more initiative to um, to back the women's teams and to give them the facilities that they need and deserve, to give them just it seems like there is still progress to be made, but I think
Hmm.
it's really important for the league to do even more, because there are a lot of folks I think who will watch their team, their women's team, But if they weren't already a fan of that club, they wouldn't be watching women's footy. Does that make sense?
Nope, nope,
And so I
completely
think
get
it's
it.
important to continue the progress that's being made. I really, really am excited to see what happens next. It's very exciting to have a women's team in all for all 18 clubs now. Um, and some of the newer clubs made some big strides last year, yourselves included. So that's been a big thing, and I really, I'm excited to see where that goes next.
Yeah, it'll be very, very interesting. The one thing when it comes to the Dockers that I'm fascinated when it comes to next year is the fact is that two of your really good gun players didn't even play last year at all. And that's Turbo and Ann Stannett. That's a Dockers team. If they get Tig back, they get Turbo back, and they get Ann Stannett back. Keep an eye out on the Dockers. They're gonna be a fun group to watch. What I'm loving is the infusion of this younger generation. In fact, there's two WA products that I think both are going to step into their clubs that they in next year, and I think both are going to show why they're two of the best in the country. That's Molly O'Hare out of WA that went to the Melbourne Demons, which I think was a perfect fit for her, and then Zippy Fish, who went to the Sydney Swans. I think both are going to be fun ones. But I'm I'm loving the young talent that's coming through. It's my state league coverage has I've gotten to watch it, and I've even had some AFLW people that don't watch state league stuff reach out to me like, Donnie, who's some of the youngsters that are coming up? And I remember telling some of my Swads fans, I go, when we drafted Zippy Fish, I said, Swans fans, keep an eye out. This is a steal for the Swans. We just probably got one of the top three players at pick five. That's legitimately. So it's going to be fun. I love the women's game. I think it is growing in leaps and bounds. I've said to numerous people, I said the growth area for footy is in women's footy. It's not in men's footy. And people will argue with me. Look at the women's footy growth in clubs throughout the country since 2017, since the W started. It is ridiculous. There were clubs had no women's teams. Now they have seven, eight, nine, 10 youth girls teams just there. So the growth is there. We still haven't even seen the peak of this talent yet. It is only going to get better. The women's game, I know it's different, and I tell many people that haven't watched it, it is a different game. It's 16 aside.
Yes.
It's got different rules. I will preach from the mountaintop. I think the men's and the women's should switch. I think the men should be playing 16 aside with the lasso rule because with their skill level and 100 years worth of playing, I think they should have less players on the field and more punishment for bad kicking. I think the women should be given 18 aside and have that taken away because they're being punished for skill levels that they're still progressing.
Mm-hmm.
That some of the skill level is not where the men's is. And I get it. That's because of the coaching is still in development just as much. So I will get off my soapbox. I'm sorry. We'll jump to it. Want to have some fun because as Americans and as international fans, there's almost a pilgrimage that I think we all talk about. So, have you ever been to Australia to see a game? And if not, is it on the horizon anytime soon?
Mm-hmm. Soon is a relative term. I have not been. I do plan to go. I have, um, it'll be a number of years yet before it's
Mhm.
something that we can swing. I've got my youngest son is 15 years old.
Mhm.
So depending on, what he decides to do for schooling and all of that and how that affects us financially, it is on the cards, but it is probably and it's definitely a number of years into the future. Um, I fully believe that the Fremantle Dockers will win the flag long before I ever get to go and see them play. But that's fine with me.
Well, I will touch wood that hopefully you are very much true on that, Leann. So, and I know it's one of those I've talked about it too. It's just purely finances when it comes to it and just time. Because I've joked, I think I could probably couch surf through about three quarters of Australia, with friends that I've I've said, if I get down there, could I come visit you? And I almost all of them have said that they'd love to entertain me, whether it's having a couch or at least a dinner or a beer. I've can't tell you how many people have offered me beers, and I'm not even a drinker, but I will probably partake to not disappoint the Aussie culture. So I want to have a little bit of fun. Let's take your let's take your crystal ball. When you do go,
Yes.
I'm one of those that I always love to ask this, that we Americans, we love food at our sport. We love enjoying that. So when you go down, is there something that you want to try at the footy when you go down?
Hot jam donuts. So in at Optus Stadium, there is I believe it's a food truck, and they are outside the stadium, and it's these ladies that make hot jam donuts. And I will not visit Perth without visiting and patronizing the hot jam donut truck. Um, I'm I have seen them. I have heard people brag about eating them, and they look delicious, and they look like the jam is probably like molten lava that will burn the roof of your mouth and also be delicious at the same time. But that is the one thing that I will not go to Optus or to Perth indeed without patronizing for sure. Is the hot
Definitely.
jam donut ladies. Actually, they're on Instagram, so hot jam donuts, everybody.
That is fantastic. And then
Yeah.
along with the food, we got to have the seat, the place to watch the footy. So I ask, when you go, where do you think will be the ideal place for you to sit to watch your first ever live AFL game featuring the Dockers?
I honestly have no idea. So I one of the things that caught my attention, obviously, when I started watching a lot of footy was the cheer squads. So
Hmm.
the cheer squads are superb. I think they're fantastic. And one of the best things about the cheer squad is those big Muppets on the sticks. I Some people call them flogs. They're just these big giant pom poms that are in the team colors, and they're right at the rail behind the goal. Um, and I have always had a slight desire to be one of the people with the giant pom poms behind the goal. I wouldn't actually want to sit there to watch a game because I don't think you could really see what's going on. So I think probably if I were actually going to a game, I would want to be, I would want to be up high because that's the one thing you can't get when you're watching the game over here. I have never ever been able to watch a game of footy and see the entire field at the same time. It just doesn't happen. You can't, it's so big, you can't see it. So I
Hmm.
think even though it is probably challenging to watch a game from that far away, I think for the first experience, I would want to be able to see everything all at once. Um, I don't know. That's just I think it would be fascinating to be able to watch the movement of all of the players from so far away and be able to get a better handle on why some of the players are doing what they're doing because of all of the off ball movement that's happening. You can't
Hmm.
get that when you're watching it on TV at all.
Yep. No, 100%. It's one of two places is usually the thing that I've heard. It's the cheer squad, as you said, just because you want to be among the ferals. You want to be among the people that are absolutely like Frio is it. Like that is it. And then there's the second tier wing, which is the position that you said where you can see everything. They're not so small that you will look like you're watching ants, and then you can see every position clearly without any obstruction, anything like that. Those tend to be the two places that most people say that they want to watch a game, is either ground level, right in that cheer squad, right amongst the most avid ultras, as the soccer term would be, almost a little bit, and then the second tier, right along that wing area is usually where most people say is great viewing for seeing the entirety of the field. So I will end this episode with the same question, and I love this. I've made a list because there's so many great games. So I'm going to ask you this: favorite game of footy you have ever seen, whether it was live, whether you watched it on delay, doesn't matter. Favorite game of footy you have ever seen.
Um, that was a hard one, but really, it was difficult to go past. Um, the one elimination final that the Dockers were in a couple of years ago against the Bulldogs.
Mhm.
They were down at one point by 41 and in the first half, and it looked bleak, like bleak. So
Mhm.
I remember the feeling of that and just but they had made some comebacks in games that year. And so I remember watching that first half and just thinking it literally everything went wrong that could go wrong. We had set shots, I think two set shots in the first half that went out of bounds on the full. Um, just it couldn't have gone any worse for the first quarter and then probably the first two-thirds of the second quarter. And then finally, I think it was 35-1 at quarter time. Then finally, at some point during the second quarter, Sonny kicked our first goal, Sonny Walters. And that kind of got everybody going a little bit. And they fought back during that second quarter. And at halftime, they were down 15. And it was just, you could just feel the air start to come back into the room, like 15-point deficit at halftime. They can actually do this. And
Mhm.
the second half was just they were just unbelievable. I think they had probably, I don't know if they had 11 straight scores were Docker scores. I can't remember how many it was, but it was, they just started to pour it on. There was a huge tackle by Freddie in the third that just really got everybody up and about. Nathan O'Driscoll had that last goal to kind of seal everything from the pocket. They call it his pocket because he likes to score from there. That was probably my favorite Dockers game just because it meant so much. They you know, finals are few and far between when you're a Frio fan. So that was probably my favorite Dockers game. My favorite game of footy ever, probably so far.
Not a bad one. I remember watching the highlights after that, and it was like it got to it, and I was like, wow, is Fremantle going to roll over in this final? And then watching the comeback was like, I was sitting there just in awe. Like I just was like, am I really watching? Is this really happening? Like I almost wanted to message both you and Lee and just be like, did that just really happen? Did,
It was
is
it was
this?
one. They were on 1 point at quarter time. It just yeah, I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, I sat there stunned, like as the highlights finished and I saw Freeman and I was like, I didn't just see that, did I? Did I just seriously see that? Like it just blew my mind. So yeah, that was an incredible game. It takes you through the roller coaster of emotion, but one of those
Extra
that you will,
dockery.
yeah, but you will never forget it for sure. So, well, Leanne, that is it. That is all my questions. This has been a wonderful conversation. I really wanted to sit down and have a chat with you, just because I go back and forth with you all the time, being somebody that's a fellow Midwesterner that loves this game of footy. I had to have you on, and it was kind of perfect to have you on it as the last one of this particular off-season supporter series. So thank you so much for hopping on the podcast. It has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. It's been fun.
Awesome, awesome. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for the off-season supporter series and this particular podcast. Keep an eye out. We have our season preview, just a little bit different this year. As I was telling Leanne off mic, we have an AFL fantasy league that myself and 9 other American footy heads are part of. We are planning on doing that, and I'm gonna make it just a little bit. We're gonna do a season preview as part of that. So we are going to record our draft. We'll have some banter between us, but I'm also going to try to get in some season preview stuff just to kind of help me out a little bit because things are getting kind of crazy as I literally am recording this. The first game of the season is less than a week away. It is going to get nuts. I cannot wait for it. Footy season is almost in full bore. Plus, I'm getting ready for my state league preview shows, which I cannot wait. The Sandful, the Waffle, and the VFL cannot wait to talk footy. Holy crap, sleep deprivation will become very much my friend, but I cannot wait. So that is going to do it for another episode of Donnie's Disposals. If you like what you are listening to, please like and subscribe. We always love having new fans find the podcast and talk this great game that is Australian rules football. And we'll be back with more coverage of footy very, very soon.